Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin eulogizes William Craigie. I've spoken at many dinners. I've never been allowed to dine without speaking, but I've never risen under such a feeling of oppression and depression as I do tonight, partly by the weight of learning in this room, and partly by the weight of the toast which I have to propose. I am expected in a few words to do justice to the merits of Professor Craigie and his co-editor and the staff, of 15,000 pages of literature, of 400,000 words, of 2 million quotations, and 178 miles of type. Sir, not even Gladstone in the plenitude of his power, and with the pomp of his polysyllables, could have done justice to that subject in anything less than a rectorial address. My task is to put what I have to say on one of his postcards, and with all my well-known love of monosyllables, I cannot do it. But perhaps before I begin, I may make a confession about the dictionary. I have not read it. But if ever a work was destined for eternity, that is it, because no sooner have we, like myself, the second generation of subscribers, drawn our last check, had it cashed, and seen it honored, and had the last volume delivered, than we are told that supplements are about to begin, and Oxford, with that sure touch of the modern generation, is appealing to us to buy this new book, because there is going to be a little article in it on appendicitis, and, by an obvious association of ideas, the panel doctor is not to be omitted. Indeed, we see here that all the words with a shady past are going to be added to the words of a more than doubtful future. Professor Craigie had indeed stood by and helped to rock the cradle of our tongue, and he has listened to the alliterative babblings of our ancestors in the nursery. He has watched that tongue through the ages, in its birth, its marriages, and its deaths, and in its associations with foreign countries. And he has brought it up to that time when it is, and we have known it for long, the most efficient instrument that has ever been used by man. I have not much acquaintance myself with tongues, but those whose powers of comparison exceed mine, and they are many, assure me that English yields place to no tongue in its power of expressing human thought, except to the tongue of ancient Greece alone. Whoever told me that I think must have been a relation to the Greek scholar in the Squirrel Inn, who was so convinced that Greek would be the one surviving tongue in the days to come, outliving English, that he started by translating Dickens' novels into Greek in the hope that future generations will be able to enjoy them even as he did. And you will also remember the result of the retranslations which caused him to abandon that effort, still in its infancy. What was the genesis of that great work? It was this. It was the desire to record and to safeguard and to establish for all time the manifold riches of the English tongue. It was that desire that led to a small group of men to lay the foundations of that structure, whose completion we are celebrating tonight. It is half a century now since Dr. Murray had his first interview with the delegates of the Clarendon Press. That year is not without interest to me, for it was just about that time that the words Prime Minister began to creep into regular official use. When I ask myself in what mood we are gathered tonight, I do not think I can express it better than it was expressed by the young man of Christchurch, who, if reported truly by Bolingbroke, was overheard in his prayers, acknowledging the divine goodness in furnishing the world with makers of dictionaries, in the self-denying, lifelong labors of a succession of great scholars from Dean Trench to the present day. We remember perhaps above all others Dr. Murray, Henry Bradley, Professor Craigie, and Dr. Onions. We remember with them the sub-editors, the voluntary readers, the assistants, the pressmen, and the compositors, and, under and above and around and behind all, the ancient and beneficent University of Oxford. These men whom we celebrate tonight, and for whom Professor Craigie will speak, have defined, they have pronounced, and they have illustrated all the words in our language. They have uncovered their origins, they have dissolved their metaphors, they have unwrapped and exposed mummies, and they have laid bare in their work the soul of England and the mind of our people for a score of generations. Our great people, in all aspects of life, in their ardor, in their worship, in their play, in their pride, and in their prejudice. Our people sublime and sometimes ridiculous. Our people in their prose and in their poetry, and every aspiration and idea and feeling that has clothed the living world and made it into the written symbol. That is very nearly literally true. It is quite true if we include with the Oxford Dictionary those priceless 6 volumes of Wright's Dialect Dictionary, which is also published by the Oxford University Press. Long may it be before the rich gift of our people for vivid word-making is sterilized with the want of a better word. And if there be a better, Professor Craigie will tell me, we call today education. I wonder if you realize, living in a haunt of learning, how much secret curiosity and the work of dictionaries coexist among those whom some would call our common people. I had occasion to make some observations lately at a dinner of mariners, and I threw out the suggestion that, before the old sailing ships were forgotten, it would be well if someone would compile a dictionary of such idiomatic phrases and turns of speech and language as were used before the mast in the old sailing ship days. And driving down 2 days later from Baker Street to Downing Street, a fairly prosaic voyage, my taxi driver said to me when I dismounted, "Excuse me, sir, but when is that dictionary of, marine, slang coming out?" I realized for the first time that I had been broadcast, and I said, "Well, I don't know, but I don't suppose it could teach you anything." To which he replied, "Well, I'm not sure, but I should like to see it." And there spoke the love of learning. Your work, sir, has been achieved by the highest form of cooperative private enterprise, and except for the gift which I am happy to think this great company of goldsmiths made to Oxford, the whole of the great and necessary expense that has been borne by Oxford, I wish I could think that the government had had something to do with it. We had a little, through the post office. We carried millions of slips, and only lost one packet. Give us credit, at least, for that. Unrivaled in completeness and unapproachable in authority is the Oxford Dictionary, as near infallibility, indeed, as we can hope get this side of Rome. And I have every respect for you in this, that no human frailty tempers your verdict. Threats of libel had not haunted your staff as nearly always haunted earlier lexicographers. And above all, in your sacred pages, from the first to the last, is found no pun, such as may be found in all the earlier editions of the great Liddell and Scott. Now I may make another confidence to you. You all remember how Betteridge in The Moonstone used Robinson Crusoe as his source Virgiliana. I have been using the Oxford Dictionary, and I began by trying potluck at the word cabinet, and I read that cabinet councils are a remedy worse than the disease. Then this morning, and you will see the appositeness that in a moment, I held a cabinet from which some of my most prominent colleagues were absent, including, I may add, the Home Secretary. I opened my Oxford Dictionary, and what did I read? Under the head Cabinet, this: "Today the Duke was forced to go to the races, while the Cabinet was held." Then, trying to frame the policy for that great party which I happened to be leader for the moment, I looked to see what Professor Craigie and his friends say on the word conservative. I have here a perfect guide to my conduct through the years. Like a great English statesman, he was constitutionally conservative, but he had the tact to perceive the conditions under which, in critical times, conservatism is possible. Then I am going to use this at the next election. Let no one presume to identify conservatism with reaction. This I have kept from all my friends, but I will tell you tonight in confidence. We find girls naturally timid, prone to dependence, but born conservatives. I wish my critics would read this book. I confess that one glance at Politician was enough. 1592, the devil was so famous a politician that hell, which at the beginning was but an obscure village, is now becoming a huge city. That day, as Francesca said, I read no further. I made a few observations some time ago at the Literary Fund dinner about a book, and in a few hours it was sold out and had to be reprinted. I hope to compensate for the rather lengthy speech I am making tonight by achieving a similar result for the Oxford Press. Now I have only one or two more words to add. Lord Oxford once said that if he were cast on a desert island, could only choose one author for company, he would have the 40 volumes of Balzac. I choose the dictionary every time. Like Ezekiel in the Valley of Dry Bones, I should pray for the four winds to breathe upon those words, that they might emerge and stand upon their feet as an exceeding great army. Our histories, our novels, our poems, our plays, they are all in this one book. I could live with your dictionary, Professor Craigie. I choose it, and I think that my choice would be justified. It is a work of endless fascination. It is true that I have not read it. Perhaps I never shall. That does not mean that I do not often go to it. Let me remind you of those words which Dr. Johnson used in his famous preface about translators in his time, which I think are apt today. If the changes that we fear be thus irresistible, It remains that we retard what we cannot repel, that we palliate what we cannot cure. Life may be lengthened by care, though death cannot be ultimately defeated. Tongues, like governments, have a natural tendency to denigration. We have long preserved our constitution. Let us make some struggle for our language. It is in that spirit of devotion to our language, as a great and noble instrument of our national life and literature, that the editors and the staff of the Oxford Dictionary have labored. They have labored so well that, so far from lowering the high standard with which the work began, they have sought to raise it as the work advanced. They have given us of their best. There could be no worldly recompense.